Hey, you beautiful people. Another live stream. I wanted to update you about my light phone experience so far now that it's been a week, and we're going to be discussing my models on how to not get into, analysis paralysis when making choices, how to make better choices and stop overthinking things. So, as far as the light phone goes, I've got it here on my desk, and I think it's been going great. It's a learning curve. It's still uploading my contacts because I have thousands of contacts with work that need to be uploaded to it. And so if I had any, concern, it would be the fact that I'm still reaching for my phone to check my email. And I wasn't a huge social media user, surprisingly, since I make content every day, but I wasn't really scrolling that much. But what I really was doing was using my phone as a way to not even be productive, but just to feel like I was being productive. And so I think that's my first realization is that I'm getting more stuff done and maybe in a better headspace. Maybe we'll decide, later on. Maybe I'll do some more specific work with that. But really, I want to talk about decision making today. And I'm a millennial. I'm a product of pop icons, dial up internet, and Chuck E. Cheese. And we used to go to that casino for kids on special occasions. And if you're not aware, Chuck E. Cheese is essentially a animatronic mouse with a restaurant of mediocre pizza and all kinds of arcade games. And so there's racing games, shooting games, sports themed games, and they all take unique tokens. I call these the original NFTs. So I probably spent 80 to 90% of my time at Chuck E. Cheese as a youngster. We're talking about 3, 4, 5 years old, around the age that my kids are getting into playing skee ball. And ultimately, I made that decision probably because it was my mom's favorite game to play. But I do remember my clearest memory of Mr. Cheese is in the paralysis of not knowing which game to play. There's all those different options I listed, but it was something where you would walk in and there's lights and there's noise and it's super stimulating, and I just didn't know what I could do or wanted to do. There's too many options. So I would kind of default to the safe road. And in a case of overcorrection, when I'm ordering food now as an adult, I get the first thing on the menu of whatever the staff recommends. So whatever the feature of the day is, that is probably what I'll end up ordering. And it's, if anything, it's simpler and it's usually a good option. I'm rarely disappointed, and if I was disappointed in that, I'm probably disappointed in something else. But that's how I generally go about making those kind of decisions. We make thousands of small decisions every day, like on our commute to work in the car, at our jobs, interacting with coworkers, in our relationships at home or with others. But when I'm presented with something like a movie to watch in the evening or on the weekend, it takes a surprising amount of effort for me to pick. I find myself scrolling through the just myriad of options on so many different apps that we have too, of just what to watch and just to unwind, so to speak. So how do we make it to the end of the week? How do we make it through all this decision making and what feels like it kind of feels like a bunch of little conflicts coming over our heads every single moment of every day. So your brain is a wildly efficient machine. Think of it that way. Kind of think of it as a computer. It's not a great example, but it's probably the best one we've got. With so much information coming in every second, your brain has the ability to process without you having to focus on every little detail. So when you're doing something like driving a car, all four limbs are acting in concert with one another and kind of independently doing unique things to make it all happen hopefully smoothly. And all the while you can like sing along to the radio, or try to keep your kids from fighting in the back, or hopefully keep your eyes off your smartphone and drive safely. But our brain makes sense of all this chaos around us And it does it by finding patterns and automatically digesting that information into manageable pieces for us to consume moment by moment. And so it's the difference between conscious and unconscious thought. So you have conscious thoughts all the time because you may be deciding, well, someone asks you a question and you have to think, what's the right answer to this? How do I want to say it? What do I want to say? And sometimes it's unconscious where you're going about your routine day in and day out. And sometimes, unfortunately, we can get into a rut and find ourselves at the end of the day thinking, what even happened today? Did I really have a conscious thought all along? And that's something that I want to unpack and challenge even more so, especially because the more that creeps into our relationships and our families, then the worse those relationships and families can become. We have so much more potential, and sometimes these ruts, they really hold us back. But what if there was a way to tap into that brain power of yours? And in a world with like 50 different kinds of tomato sauce, we always get sucked into the same comfortable choices and find ourselves just sitting there thinking about all the options and not really taking over any of them and unable to make a choice as we weigh each individual option out there. But what if we were able to tap into that brain power and simplify the patterns that our brains are receiving in a way that eliminates the fear of making choices itself that we maybe will later regret, eliminates that fear. So I'm a fan of Steve Jobs. We'll use this as an example. He's a maverick pioneer, the guy who's behind Apple and all the devices that so many people know and love today, and just the brand and everything. And in business and in so many ways, he was such a trendsetter. Iconically, he wore the same turtleneck sweatshirt, the same Levi's 501 jeans, and the same New Balance sneakers every single day. And so when you picture Steve Jobs in your mind, you're probably picturing him wearing that outfit. On second thought, I should have worn it for this live stream just to really drive home the point that his mission was to reduce decision fatigue along with creating a sort of visual identity and having continuity with his brand. But really, it was primarily about not having to make the decision of what to wear every day and to avoid the pressures. As someone, he had a lot of money, and a lot of influence, and a lot of people wanted him to wear their clothing. And instead of him having to say no thousands of times to thousands of different people saying, I don't want to wear your clothes, he just said yes to the one thing that he truly wanted to wear. He got really down to basics, and he was able to avoid all that fatigue with his decision-making processes. So there's forces in this world that want you to wear your latest style or their latest style, that want you to eat their unique foods, that they want you to watch their specific shows and consume their entertainment. And they profit from an endless supply of seemingly new and exciting options. And their plan, it works on us because humans, we love novelty. And when I say novelty, I mean like unique experiences. When we experience something unique, dopamine in our brain releases and it builds like a reward loop. It's kind of the feel good chemical in our brain that says, hey, that was good, do that more. And so this is the power behind social media. When we're scrolling on our phones through a news feed, or whatever they're calling it these days, through like the constant flow of content on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, it's a constant flow of novelty because you could be watching a video of someone cooking a meal, and then you're scrolling and you're watching a video of a hot air balloon, and then you're scrolling and you're seeing a video of your friend's birthday party that you may or may not have been invited to, and then you're scrolling and you see someone shredding a guitar solo, and then you're scrolling and you see someone summoning a mountain, and it's just this constant flow of novelty and excitement, and it's pinging your brain to seek out more and more of that novelty and to keep scrolling. That's the whole point, is to keep your attention and to maintain it in that space. But that stimulation, it has a limit and it can wear us out. I've been there, and I'm sure that you felt the fatigue of scrolling, and some, often we call it doom scrolling, as we just scroll continuously and forever, and we're not really getting much value out of it other than just the constant hit of like a low grade reward loop over and over, just to feel like we're doing something. And that's how I found myself with my phone. The thing that I'm missing is my email, where I would refresh my inbox, I'd read old messages, I'd file them away here and there, I would respond to some things, but I found myself most of the time just managing it, not really even responding or receiving anything of much value, just constantly managing that space in my email inbox. And as I remove that from my phone and only do that during specific times during the day, this week I've found that it's really opened my mind to how that's affected me on more of a like a moment to moment basis, not just day to day. And so by limiting clothing options, Steve Jobs escaped that treadmill of chasing after the latest style. And it's likely that only one option is going to be too extreme for you. It's too extreme for me. You don't see me wearing the same clothes every single day. They're similar, but not the exact same. And there's a happy middle between zero or just one choice and infinite choices. Somewhere in between there, we have to find where our space is. I think that with the right framework, here's the key: writing down a framework that automatically limits your decisions to just a easy few options is going to be the thing that keeps you off that treadmill of constantly seeking after the reward of something novel, or that keeps at bay all the forces that want to advertise their best choice for you. So when we started having kids, it was time for a new car. I had a Jeep at this time, and I loved that car. From the leaky roof to the leaky coolant, this thing had so much character, and it was fun to drive. But it didn't really score high on safety and or reliability, so it was time for a new ride. And when I was shopping for a new car, with my wife, of course, with this new family that we were putting together, it can be exhilarating and it can be terrifying. And depending on your personality and how much you really like cars, you could go back and forth through that experience. But with the right framework written down, it was honestly a breeze. I couldn't have asked for anything better. We went through some good options, some bad options, but all together, it went pretty quickly. Here are some of the limiters that I put together and that we wrote down and agreed upon as a couple that helped us through this process. Now, there's new versus used car. I've got a pretty strong opinion about that for us personally, and if you watch any of my other content, which you definitely should on this channel, you can go check that out on whether or not I would buy a new or used car. There's price, size, location, how easily it was to get to us, safety, reliability, fixability, how easy it was to fix and how expensive that would be, the quality, the cup holders. There's all these different reasons why I wanted to make some of these decisions before we started looking at cars and really trying to make the decision for us. So these need 100% buy-in, all these different factors from both people, from all the decision makers. But for us in this example, it was my wife and I. From the two of us, we needed buy-in on all these different examples before we got to actually buying a car. And the result was a superb minivan that is agonizingly convenient, very comfortable, and it is just different compared to my good old Jeep. And if you're wondering, Pam, the Jeep, got a new paint job and lives her days out making making people happy on an animal reserve for like a safari staff vehicle out on the plains. It's where she ultimately belonged, and I can't wait to visit her someday. So I'm clearly a nostalgic person, and it's something that, maybe you're like that. Maybe you could care less about a car, and this isn't necessarily an example for you, but you're probably thinking of a time when you were having to make a decision and there were just too many choices out there. Like every other day in the grocery store, It's not just like when you're going to the produce and you're like, I'm an organic eater, so I only buy organic. So there's the organic bananas. Bada bing, bada boom, here it is. I put it in the cart, I go and I check out. But then you get to the cereal aisle. And if you've ever been in the cereal aisle with a 3-year old, it is like a cosmic whirlwind of options and desire and opinions and voices. And I just generally avoid it altogether. It's just not really something that I'm going to do, dragging my kids down the cereal aisle and thinking like this is going to go well. This is probably going to be a smooth experience. And so rather than having to avoid it altogether, coming up with some of these framework limiters. And, limiting seems like such a bad word in our context in our society. Like, who wants to put limits on themselves? I want all the options all the time. That's what society has gifted us in our psyche, is this idea that we should have all options available to us all the time. And that generally leads most of us to analysis paralysis, where you're just sitting there paralyzed thinking about these options, or putting far too much time and energy into a choice where all you really wanted was the same cereal that's your favorite, and you're like, well, maybe I need to try this new temporary, only for a limited time option variation, and thinking like this is going to make me even that much more happier. And then sometimes it does, sometimes it's disappointment. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to go and explore that novelty, but if you're constantly seeking novelty every moment of every day, then your brain is going to get fatigued from that. And we experience that day in and day out. It's not about the number of options, it's all about the framework for making the decision in a way that's efficient and successful and is going to bring you satisfaction and is going to bring you peace and freedom, because there's a lot of forces that are trying to control the way you think and what you put your attention towards. But getting freedom for that it's a liberating thing. It's a positive thing. And really, it often leads to more satisfaction as a result. So I have friends that agonize about their next car and what they're going to wear and weighing all their options for days and weeks, months and years. And too often their final decision, it's a poor fit in some avoidable way that they could have controlled for. And then we may have talked about, but they end up going a different direction because of an impulse decision that went against their values or their norms or their framework. And so it's time to rethink our decision-making system, recapture our own attention from the constant assault of advertising and forces out there, and really take control in a way that lets go into some of these limiting forces. Now, if you enjoy this live stream, please let me know. Let me know how the quality is. Let me know how the content is, because, I'm used to making these videos and I've got like a lot of different kinds of people that value some parts in different ways. So if you've got a topic or if you've got a question, I love Q&A. I love answering questions. If you've got a question, feel free to subscribe to the newsletter, and there's always a Q&A part at the bottom of that. And I'd love to, to see what you're thinking about, what you're struggling with, what you think you can find as a growth area in your life.